Awesome. I think we can kick it off. First of all, Rahul, thanks for joining. Some of you might know Rahul by his Twitter prank. That's certainly how I found about him, and that's maybe something we can start with. But before we go there, Rahul used to work after graduating. He worked at Facebook for I think a couple of years, then Uber, and then basically was bored because he didn't have high enough agency there to build projects he wanted, and that's how he decided to start Julius AI basically last summer. And yeah, we have him here today to chat more about Julius, about Rahul, and learn more what you guys are doing. Thanks for joining.
Hey guys, I want to give a huge shout out to Hyperstack folks who have generously sponsored my compute over the past month or so. Basically, I got 16 H100s, which is 2 8 GPU nodes, and the performance has been amazing, basically 2x the speed up compared to my A100 nodes. So I want to quickly show you how you can get started yourself. It takes basically 3 steps only. You go to the environments here, you create a new environment, you give it a name, you pick between Canada and Norway. That's the first step. The second step, you go to SSH keys here, you create a new pair, you pick the environment you just created, you give it a name, you paste your public SSH key. That's it. And finally, go to virtual machines, deploy new machine, give it a name again, select the environment. Let's select Canada here because they have more compute there. Then you select the hardware you want, like for example H100s. You select the images, you select the SSH key you just created, and hit deploy. That's it. Literally a couple of minutes to get started. It was really easy for me to just basically create these 2 nodes I just mentioned and get started running LLM trainings. So the documentation is super cool. I could actually solve all of my problems just by looking at their docs. They additionally have a Slack channel where they were super helpful, so I can't recommend them enough, honestly. The thing they kind of focus on is basically, because a lot of these GPU providers focus on big enterprises, so oftentimes you can't get on-demand H100s, whereas NextGen focuses particularly on that. You can get top-of-the-line hardware on demand, even if you're an individual or like a smaller team or whatnot. They also focus on bigger companies, but that's kind of their edge here. So without further ado, guys, let's go back to the talk. I do suggest you check them out, and let's continue.
Thanks so much for having me. Really excited to come here and chat with folks. I think there's a lot of good AI people in this community, so happy to share all my learnings and anything you guys have to ask me.
That's amazing. Awesome. So let's start. Maybe just briefly introduce yourself. Just I said kind of what you've done, but if you have anything else to share, like we can start there.
Sounds good. Yeah. So I'm Rahul. I'm the founder of Julius AI. Julius is an AI data scientist that helps you analyze data sets, get insights from your data, and create visualizations. We think that in the future, AIs will write pretty much a lot of our code. And when that happens, a lot of people will be able to do some really interesting things that they previously couldn't because the bottleneck was learning to code. As of this week, Julius writes and executes over 1 million lines of code every 48 hours. And we hope to make that number going up.
Awesome, man. That's super cool. Okay, so let's start by, if you can give us just some context, what happened with the whole Twitter prank? Like, I mean, first of all, you have to be very extroverted to do such a thing, which already makes an outlier for the San Francisco gang. And so, maybe we can start there. Like, what was the idea? How did you find out about that? And did you know that the reporters are coming? And how long did you wait? Can you kind of give us behind the scenes, other than the 2 minutes we had on YouTube there?
Yeah, I saw Jonah said good founder energy. I really appreciate that. I think in San Francisco, you're right. Being a little extroverted is an advantage because there's a lot of really smart people in San Francisco that have a lot of insight into things, but a lot of them tend to be very introverted. So just even 10% of extroversion is important. A second thing is I feel like a lot of people take themselves too seriously, and they get too worked up about it. So I think it's important to have fun. But the story of the day is basically I wake up every morning around this time, and then I go to the gym, and then I work out and I go to my office. And my gym happens to be in the same building as Twitter, or Twitter, what used to be Twitter HQ. That morning, I walk to the gym and I see a bunch of cameras outside. So I think it's really funny that how there's like reporters out there who just want something to happen, And I walk into the gym. I pass by all these TV reporters, and then I start working out. And then halfway through my workout, I get the idea of like walking out with the box in my hand to see if someone falls for it. And I text my friend Daniel. I ask him, "Hey, you want to come through? Can you bring 2 boxes?" And he comes through. Like, he brings 2 boxes. We just walk out, and the reporters, they bite on it. And honestly, we thought this would be something funny that maybe our friends know about. Maybe like 10 people know that we did this. But within like 5 minutes, it completely blew up. My phone was blowing up. Everyone knew about it. So we didn't expect it to be turn into a big thing, but it definitely did.
How much
And
did
then-
you improv? How much did you improv during the like filming? Because the thing with the book was like crazy cool.
It was all improv. We didn't plan the names. We didn't plan any of the lines. Honestly, we didn't even know if they would bite, because they had seen me walk into the gym like just 40 minutes ago. And honestly, so that day, like after an hour after the thing happened, I had my YC office hours, and my YC partner, I walk into the office hours. My YC partner, first thing he asks me is, "Hey, I'm in some group chats and they're saying you worked at Twitter. Is this real? Like, are you doing YC and working a job at the same time? Like, what's going on?" And after giving this whole story, and then later he reached out and said, "No, that's great founder energy, because you're just like out there hacking systems, especially social systems." And I feel like that applies a lot if you're ever doing sales or marketing or PR. A lot of that applies there too.
Super cool. But like, how did you get the book? How was the box filled if you went to the gym? Like, or you actually have that book in your gym or whatnot?
I actually have that box still in my living room. It's just like lying there, and the books are still in it. But the books happened to belong to Daniel, and he just brought them in the box. And then I looked, so I was running out of lines to say, so I looked down and there's a book. So I like just pick up the book and say, Michelle Obama wouldn't have happened if Twitter was owned by somebody.
The most legendary lines happen serendipitously. So that's amazing.
It's true.
You actually mentioned YC, so I want to give the people here and on YouTube later broader context about who you are. And so I actually didn't know you were a part of YC. So can you tell us, like, was Julius AI what you like the idea that you used to apply for YC, or you had some previous idea and then you pivoted? Can you give us some context there?
Absolutely. So I used to be an engineer at Uber. So I left college. I worked at Facebook on misinformation, which is kind of ironic because I was spreading misinformation that day outside Twitter. And then after that, I worked at Uber, and I got really bored because I couldn't build and ship the things I wanted to work on. So I quit, and my first insight was the logistics industry has this massive backlog and visibility problem. So like the way you book an Uber ride, you can see on your app where your car is, and it shows you where the ETA is and where on the map the car is and how long is the time to pick up. All of that doesn't exist for trucks, and it makes it really hard to get your truckloads of goods, coordinate those pickups, etc. So my first idea was, can we aggregate all the data from hardware that's on these trucks and make it really intuitive and visible on a map for companies like Whole Foods that book these trucks? And then also make it queryable using a natural language interface. Like, can you just say, hey, where's my truck that's coming to this location at 4 p.m.? And we worked on that for 6 months. We went through YC with that idea, but turns out it's a problem that people want a solution for. And we were able to build something that worked, but it was really hard to convince truck drivers to share their location 24/7. There's just like this big generation gap in how comfortable these people are with technology, especially sharing their live location 24 hours. So 6 months in, we realized, okay, this is not working out, but what can we do? So we have some some stuff that we've been playing with this like natural language interface to query the data. Can we apply that on other data sets? And we kept working towards that goal until we arrived at Julius about 6 months after that.
Nice. Super cool story. And I want to take one more step back, because a lot of, I don't know how many founders are in this audience right now, but like SF is kind of the place where a lot of AI and tech founders wanna move to.
Yeah.
I know you were not there until maybe 2020. So like, how did the transition go for you? Was it because you went to Facebook and then they basically paid for your visa and stuff, or how did that process of going to SF work?
Yeah, happy to talk about it. So I think San Francisco, it's definitely a lot of founders, but there's also a lot of good AI people in general. Hackers, builders, researchers, and it's very easy to meet people here. So even if you don't live in SF, I would recommend you just fly in for a week or a weekend. And it's surprising to me how often people will reply to a cold Twitter DM when you just say, "Hey, I'm in San Francisco. Would you like to get coffee?" And it works surprisingly well. So in my case, I moved to San Francisco for summers before 2020. So one summer for an internship at Facebook and then at Uber. And they, as an intern, it was easy because they sort of had housing and et cetera figured out for me. But I noticed this shift when I finally officially moved to SF, between how SF used to be before COVID and after COVID. So before COVID, I moved here for summers, and I noticed that a lot of people in SF at that point were not people who just want to work on cool shit or want to be on the frontier, right? SF used to be this weird place where it's hackers, it's builders, it's researchers, they're working on crazy ideas. And then at some point in time in the 2010s, it became a lot of people who wear Patagonia vests and just want to work some corporate job. And they turn startups into very corporate. And that was sort of different and weird to see when I used to move here for summer internships. Then when I actually finally moved here during COVID, the first 2 years of COVID really sucked because there was nothing to do. Everything was shut down, nobody to meet. And then after 2022, things really picked up because all the Patagonia West people, all the corporate people, they left, and just the weirdos were left behind. And now it's sort of, you can meet people who are very open-minded, who you tell them a crazy idea and they don't automatically go, "Oh, that's never going to work." They say, if this could work, what would that look like? And honestly, just like having that, it's just having even one person say that to you when you're working on something hard and ambitious is so reassuring. So that's what my take is, pre and post COVID SF.
Mm-hmm. The priesthood of SF was left. Everybody else was purged to the rest of the Americans. Cool. Okay, so let's focus on Julius AI for the rest of the talk. You mentioned millions of lines of code. I'm kind of going without structure here, but I'm curious, how much do you know about the demographics? Like, out of those millions of lines of code, what's the distribution across regions, across the world? Is it mostly like states, or is it more broad than that, India or whatnot?
Yeah, totally. Thanks, Brian, for sharing the link. And happy to share more. So the demographic, today it's largely US, with some adoption internationally. And one of the things we have found was, these LLMs, they're really good at translating between languages, right? That's where that was the original intention of the transformer, right? So a lot of people who previously couldn't get access to data science or data analysis because they couldn't learn English or they weren't fluent in English, now they can just talk to it in their native language. We have a lot of people who speak Spanish and are able to do natural language programming with Spanish. but bulk of the users are in the US today, and we hope to be more international. So if you guys are joining from around the world, please give Julius a try. In terms of the million lines of code, all of it is Python. And this is an early heads up. Next week we're launching support for R, which is our second programming language and support on Julius. But today it's all Python, and our journey to Python was sort of interesting. I can maybe talk about how we got to Python in a sec, if you'd like.
I'm actually more curious about how you got to R. Like,
Yeah.
just to hear where the demand, where the queries came from, and then you decided, hey, let's build in. I saw beta support for R right now as we speak. But yeah, definitely.
Totally. So the way R came about is we found this group of users who were very actively using us for things like biosciences, biostatistics, bioinformatics. In fact, today I'm about to go meet a user who emailed us and said, hey guys, I'm a big fan of Julius because I do research on aging, and the bioinformatics person on our team left, and there's nobody crunching the data on our experiments anymore and giving us insights on what experiments we should run next. So I'm able to do all this analysis and data science and statistics using Julius just with natural language without knowing how to code. And there's a lot of people like that who reached out to us and they said, this is awesome. The problem is that our systems that we have in place, they all use R. So for reproducibility, if your systems could write R and do the analysis in R, that would be really helpful. So we said, okay, can we make R work? And I saw a question from Jonah. A big part of making R work is making the kernels work in R. So we use a variety of models, everything from GPT-4 to Claude to Gemini, and all these models, they have a knowledge cutoff date, and they remember R or a certain version of R and a certain version of each package in R. And when it tries to use a model or a package in R or a version of R that is no longer compatible with the R kernels that we're running, it causes a lot of errors. So the first step in making that work is, how do we make the kernels compatible with where the models are? And how do we make the kernels pre-packaged with all the popular packages that our users are using? And then third thing is collecting a lot of metrics on when users try to do analysis in R, with just English. Just say, hey, here's my data. Can you find me what I use Seurat to find me like the outliers in this genomics data? And collecting a lot of metrics on what happens when you tell the model to do that. The model obviously writes code, and you run that code, and that code sometimes has errors. How do we find what are the most common errors and knock those out?
Sorry, you can ignore the chat. I'm just writing.
Yeah, can you like collect a ton of metrics on where these errors happen, and then build guardrails up front to prevent those code errors from happening. So Julius today works in a self-correcting loop. It can write code, run it, look at the error, and then figure out what to do next. The errors don't always happen. In fact, most of the times there is no error. But even then, the model takes a complex task and breaks it down into a series of steps. So let's say you say, hey, here's my data. I want to do clustering on it. The model will first load the data, look at the columns, then run more code to look at the column types, then run more code to do a first take on clustering. And that sometimes compiles, sometimes doesn't. And the model, just like a human data scientist would, is able to, in a loop, unpack a task and approach it. So making R work is three parts. One is, making the kernels compatible with where the models are. Second is finding what are the common packages our users use and want. either intentionally or unintentionally. Because for a lot of users, they don't even know the complexity of code. They just want the thing to work. So what are the common use cases and how do we build those packages into the kernels? And then third thing is figuring out what are the common errors and how do we recover from that and build guardrails for that upfront.
Nice. Thanks for the broader context. Maybe I think it might make sense, given that you just tried to verbally describe how Julius works. You can just share the screen and walk us through how the whole user experience looks like, and maybe if you're brave enough to do a demo in a live setup, just show us how some of that stuff can be done.
I would love to. I love live demos because sometimes live demos break and it's fun. But this is Julius, yeah. So Julius.ai, and one way to think about Julius is it's a combination of an interface that puts LLMs on top of the shell of a computer. So in this chat, what's happening is my instance is connected to a VM in the cloud where these models can freely run code and execute code to get insights from their data, or like pretty much do anything with code. I can switch between runtime. So I'm going to switch to Python for this case. And a lot of users use Julius for data science and statistics, for math. Some users use Julius for scraping the internet. They're able to use Julius to get insights from web pages. But in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this data set I have of gene expressions data. And I'm going to say, load this data. And first thing you can do is when you load this data is you can actually select certain columns or cells or part of the table you want the AI to focus on. But in my case, I'm just going to make it focus on the whole thing. So I'm going to say load this data. And what's happening now is this green dot says we're connected to a code sandbox. Awesome. And then the model will write some code to do what I told it to do. So here it loaded the data and showed me some rows of the data. Now, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to say, can you show me a visualization to better understand this data? And
it's actually fairly fast. The loading of the table happened really quickly. I was surprised.
Thank you. Yeah, we've spent a lot of our effort into like optimizing both the code runtime. So how do we make the code run really fast? And then where we can, we try to use smaller models to optimize for tasks that are repeatable and don't need a lot of intelligence. For example, load the data. So in this case, I'll say, great, do cell counts. I want to see what the cell counts are visually. So examine resources, like it's connecting to the code runtime, writing more code using Seaborn to do the analysis. For a lot of users, the code doesn't mean anything, because what we realized is a lot of users use Julius even if they don't know how to code. And they're able to verify the logic in the code by simply looking at the English explanation of what the code does. So they can verify the logic by just in pseudocode understanding what the model is doing. So here it gave us this visualization that it generated for us on the fly. And I can understand this data better. We have built a lot of neat features that allow you to dive deep into the data, or I should say delve deep into the data. So let's say I want to edit how this visualization is generated. So I can go here, I can click edit code if I know how to code, and edit certain blocks of the code. So if I want to make the face color black, I can just do that. I wouldn't do it right now, but the code is completely editable. and you can make small tweaks to the code and then rerun it. Not just the code, but the graph is also editable. So I can go here and click Edit Graph. And the way we have built this graph editor is it's completely AI native. We said, you know what? Users generate all kinds of graphs. They generate everything from scatter plot to pie charts to whatever this thing is. And there's in no way we can build that long tail of the UI for these graphs. So how about we make the graph editor completely AI native? So the way we've built this is we take this code block and we pass it to Haiku along with this image. And we say, hey, here's this code that generates this graph. Based on this, can you return some parameters that we can surface in the UI and the user can toggle them? So the UI is generated all based on what the model output is. And then we also offer custom instructions. So let's say if I want to make this graph green or the background green or move the grid lines, you can simply just give it instructions and say, hey, here's the code block that generates this graph, and here's the image. Can you remove the grid lines, or can you zoom into the graph? Being able to give those natural language instructions turns out a lot more intuitive to our users, because the learning curve to using Julius goes down by a lot. You don't need to learn any features. You can just tell it in English what are the specific changes you want to make to your graph. So you can basically go here, and it's the way it does retrieving graph editor is because it's calling the model, passing the code block, passing the image, and getting those parameters from the backend. So here I can just basically.
Sorry for interrupting. What did you have to do? You just selected the previous chart and the previous piece of code, the snippet, and then it automatically just started doing this. But like it wasn't intuitive to me, or maybe I have skipped some step of how that happened.
So basically, we want to, if you've used any sort of graph editing tool, they have a bunch of toggles in the UI, a bunch of buttons, and ways you can like change what the graph is all about. But that's, first of all, very intimidating to the user. Second of all, there's a lot that you can't do with those things, because you can build a button for everything or toggle for everything. So the way we do this is we take this code that generated the graph, we pass it to a model. In this case, it's Haiku. And we pass an image to Haiku, and we say, hey, based on the image and the code that made this image, if you were to return a JSON that had UI toggles, how would that JSON look like? Like, maybe it's all about the legend, it's about the size of the graph, maybe it's the title, maybe it's the width. The model then decides, hey, what are the parameters I need to return to the UI that will allow easy configuration of this graph?
Mm-hmm. That makes complete sense. I was more thinking about the actual UI. How do you, as a user, how do you interact to get that type of action from the model? I didn't see that small, like chart icon that you pressed. That was yeah. But
So
thanks for the context.
Yeah, you can give custom instructions. You can change the legend, and this is all like model generated. So after the chat, if you guys try Julius, it may look different. The width may look different. The legend position may look different. All these options are also generated on the fly.
That's super cool, man. That's really super cool. Can you actually try and toggle a couple of things? Let's see whether something breaks.
Yeah, let's do it.
I really like it. Maybe one question is, how do you long-term differentiate yourself from something like ChatGPT? It looks like OpenAI is also trying to put whatever they build, be it like audio model, be it text-based model, be it DALL-E or whatnot, they're all plugging into this UI as well. So how are you trying to differentiate yourself compared to them, given that they can actually build models in-house and not share some stuff outside externally to use that for their own advantage, building better products? Like, how do you think about this whole competitive space?
Totally. So we work with a variety of model developers or model companies, And we're big fans of what OpenAI is doing. The way I think about this is competitively is, a lot of people compare Julius to Code Interpreter when we launched. And in fact, Code Interpreter had launched before Julius. So a big question was, why will people even use Julius? And even though we launched after Code Interpreter, we have been able to grow to 500,000 users in a very short amount of time, because we're intensely focused on building the experience and building the accuracy that goes with a product like Julius, right? You're giving it your data. Especially if you're not a programmer, you want to trust the results. You don't want it to keep erroring out. And what we are really focused on is, how do we make the code generation accurate? How do we make it error out as few times as possible? How do we build the experience that is very intuitive to the users when they're doing certain things? And focusing on the use case that we're focusing on allows us to build all of that out. So we have this advanced reasoning mode that basically makes the AI come up with a plan ahead of time and then go about executing the plan one by one. It's sort of like you take a complex problem, break it down into a series of tasks, and then go dive deep into one task at a time. Make sure you get it to work. If you can get it to work, you try a bunch of different approaches. And when it works, you kind of go back to the meta level and try the next task. We allow configuring between tools. You can make workflows. This edit graph feature is all AI native. So very soon, we are going to supercharge our code runtimes with GPUs. I met Jensen last month, and my pitch to Jensen was, there's 10 million scientists out there who want to do accelerated computing and want to use GPUs to crunch their numbers and get insights. There's millions of financial analysts out there that want to process vast amounts of data, but all these people can't do it because programming on GPUs is not easy, right? But NVIDIA has these libraries called cuDF, cuNumeric, cuML. All these are abstractions on top of CUDA, and they're exposed in Python. And what if Julius could run those libraries and democratize access to, running computations on GPUs to everyone? Imagine if millions of people could run computations on GPUs. And we're soon adding GPUs to Julius so that you can just, in plain English, give it instructions, and Julius will run code on GPUs. And that level of focus on the use cases and the problems our users have is what I believe is our competitive advantage today. Whether it's our moat, I think that's a harder question to answer. I actually think that moats take at least 10 years to build. And
And I don't like that question at all. When somebody asks, you are starting a startup, and somebody asks you right now in this competitive space, what's your moat? And I'm like, dude.
That's true. I think
we can ship fast. We're a good team. I don't know. We're moving faster than the other guy.
Yeah, totally. And if our users keep liking us, I think as long as we focus on our users, we're in a good spot, and we have to keep the lead. One of the things we do is, actually, let me stop sharing my screen for 1 second and pull up this thing on my screen.
He has a Notion page with pranks. Doesn't want to disclose them.
I'm actually pulling up Notion right now. So, okay, let me share my screen again.
Mm-hmm.
So these are the things our users are saying. This user emailed us who used, ChatGPT data analysis, and his thing just kept erroring out. You give it your data set, and it writes code, and it runs it, and it just keeps running into errors. But then he replied with, Julius just works. In this other case, this other user was trying to do this analysis with ChatGPT, and it kept struggling. And then he tweeted about us. because somebody replied to him and said, hey, you should try Julius. And Julius instantly worked. And, we get users reach out to us all the time about these things. And the way we make the code execution optimal is we first collect a lot of metrics and what are the common errors. Then we use a variety of models to review the code that model A has written. It's sort of like you write code and your colleague who does your code review is able to spot certain gaps in the code that you may have missed. In a similar, pair programming, exactly. So we're able to use a lot of those tricks to make sure that this doesn't happen on Julius.
Super cool. I have maybe a related question to the previous one. As far as I understand what you're doing, for example, take Replit. I think they're also trying to democratize coding, access to GPUs, all of this, but they are doing it from much more developer perspective, right? Whereas it looks to me that you're focused much more on folks who don't even know how to code. Like, as you said, financial analysts, whoever wants to do something with data, but they don't necessarily need to know how to code. Whereas Replit is much more focused on developers. Their whole branding and UI and everything kind of screams, hey, you don't need to know a lot, but you need to be a developer. Whereas you guys are more for laymen, so to speak, if that makes sense. Would that be an accurate description right now?
I guess so. We have a few different types of people who use Julius very actively. It's people who do financial analysis. It's people in sales and marketing that work jobs in big companies that need a data scientist, but their team is very short on data scientists, and they are able to just go to Julius and get some early analysis done on the work that they're doing, like ad campaign data or like sales data. There's people who use Julius for computational biology and bioinformatics. So, but this all we didn't know until we launched Julius. We actually thought that the people who would use Julius the most is actually data analysts and data scientists. And when we actually launched Julius, it had, you can upload data sets, but it also had an option to connect to databases like Postgres. And turns out that we were wrong. For every one of data analysts and data scientists, there's like 10 people who have data, who have the curiosity to ask questions about the data, but they lack the expertise to go in and get those answers. And they found Julius really helpful. So it's less like we picked that group, and it's more like that cohort of users picked us overwhelmingly. So we sort of kept making it easier and easier and easier for them. But people who are programmers use Julius all the time too, because for a simple Python script, you're after a long day of coding, you don't want to write a simple Python script. You just want the models to help you with it. And for the easy, repeatable stuff that you trust the models with, you can always give that to Julius. Like, we're a team of programmers, and we use Julius to do our own data science and exploration all the time, because it's just quick and easy. Nice.
So Python R, but English being the hottest programming language, as Karpati likes to say.
Yes.
Nice. Cool. Can you maybe show us your favorite use case? If you can share the screen and show us what's something that you kind of use on a daily basis, or anything unexpected that you think we should know.
Yeah, totally. Well, I won't be able to show what I use it for, since this call is recorded. But I would love to show you something that really surprised me, if that works.
Mm-hmm.
So around February, we had this Professor Beck, reach out to us and say, hey guys, I've been a paid user for 7 months now. And we had no idea, because he signed up with his Gmail. We had no idea this professor was using us. And he said, guys, I'm actually going to use Julius to teach a whole class this semester at Rice University. So, and we were like, no way. I actually fly down to meet him, and it's true. He's teaching a whole class using Julius. And I meet him, and this is his course slides, which actually teaches the class using Julius. He's saying, hey, we will use Julius, which combines several LLMs with a Python interpreter. And what's really inspiring to us was to actually go through his course slides. Like pretty much every single slide teaches the user how to ask Julius for something. So this is a classroom full of people learning financial analysis, and the thing that they're learning, the tool that they're learning to use is how to ask Julius. So how do you compute CVX returns? Is ask Julius to pip install via finance, and then ask Julius to use pandas, then ask Julius to do an inner merge, ask Julius to keep only the last 120 rows. He is sort of like every single slide is ask Julius, and everything from like data loading to like regression is all like ask Julius. And just seeing that and seeing a classroom full of graduate students learning how to do financial analysis using Julius was really mind-blowing to us, because well, first of all, it feels great to see people use your product. But second of all, it's that these people are not going to go into the industry and do financial analysis, and they're all going to use Julius. And previously, they couldn't learn how to do regression because they weren't coders. But now all of them are programmers, and they're all programming in like natural language by asking Julius to produce a scatter plot or asking Julius to include the regression line. And that felt really meaningful.
This is really inspiring. I'm also not that optimistic about their future, to be honest. If their whole class is about Ask Julius, that's gonna be fun for on the job market once they wrap up with with Rice.
Yeah. I saw a question about should I just like answer a question if I see it, or should we wait till the end?
Yeah, feel free to answer if you found something that sounds
totally
interesting.
So about the malicious file, how do you make sure that the data you upload to Julius, what if it's malicious? So the way we do it is all the code environments, including the file uploads, they're all sandboxed by user. So each user gets their own VM in the cloud where you upload your files and you do your analysis. After an hour of inactivity, those files get deleted because the whole VM gets wiped. Now, you can upload a malicious file, you can upload malicious code, or you can prompt the model to write malicious code that breaks the server, but it only affects your server. Actually, you guys can try all you guys can try this, which is you can go to Julius and tell the AI, hey, delete everything on your server, RMRF. And it will actually do that. But it only affects your VM because it's all contained in this like virtual machine that's only accessible to your model or your instance. And after 1 hour, we wipe that VM and destroy it. And building that infrastructure was really painful, and getting that right up front was really painful. But we put in that investment up front because it allows us, first of all, to ensure security of the data, security of our users, and it allows us the ability to customize. Now we can add GPUs, we can scale up those instances, give our users more compute if they need, and do things like install R on it.
I've seen RF lights, turns out. Oh my God. Okay, so maybe you mentioned you're planning to add R. You already have a beta support. I was actually surprised because I know one guy who was an expert and very bullish on R maybe 5 years ago, and then he publicly stated, okay, I'm switching to Python. And like, I mean, definitely in the machine learning community, everybody is just Python. Like R, nobody ever uses R. But like, we are in a bubble, obviously, and maybe you, as somebody who is running this and you're getting these requests, can you tell me a bit more? Who is actually using R? Is there a lot of legacy companies with legacy code bases that need R still, or is there anything where R has a competitive advantage compared to Python? Like, if you have any brief explanation.
Great question. So I think from what I've learned, from talking to our users, people who work in, say, sales and marketing and use Julius, they don't care what language is being used. People who do financial analysis, they all prefer Python because you have all these modules, and the ecosystem of modules that are better for Python financial analysis existed like pre-existing in Python. Then there's this third cohort of users. It's people who do research in either biology or hard sciences, or computational biology, bioinformatics, physics, chemistry. There's a professor at Yale School of Medicine who uses Julius for orthopedic research, and all these people, they either work on research that uses R, or they have previously worked on systems that use R. And those people, even though they were able to get things done with Python, kept reaching out to us for the last 7-8 months. Like, guys, I love Julius. It's awesome. It does everything for me. But if you could support R, that would be really helpful. I recently saw a tweet from Kareem Carr on Twitter. He said, I found that people with a computer science background all tend to prefer Python, and so do I. But then people who don't have a technical background and they are trying to, do data science, they all tend to prefer R. I don't know how they get introduced to R over Python, but that's just how this sort of the split is. So Julius will support both, depending on what you prefer.
What would you say percentage-wise is demand for Python versus R? What are you observing right now, if you can share?
Yeah, totally. Well, so today in production, Julius writes 1 million lines of R code or Python code every 48 hours, and so it's in production. It's like 95 or 100% Python. We think that number will shift more towards 70-30, given like all the chats we've had with our users and understood how they're using these tools. We think it will shift to like 70-30, and a lot of it also depends on how we build the experience, right? Because if you're a user who just wants to get the job done and doesn't care about the language used by the model, if we give them default Python or default R, do they ever switch between the runtimes? That's an important question. Or are they completely agnostic to what runtime the AI uses? This is still an unanswered question for us, but I think so far it's going to be like 70-30.
Thanks. Okay, I think John has one question, and then we have 10 more minutes. I would love to spend the rest of the minutes to just focus on hardest technical challenges as much as you can share publicly, and just discuss what was hard, what was really hard when it comes to technical aspects. Okay, Jonah, you can ask your question now.
Hi, thanks. You're describing the prompt chain and seeing the rice example got me kind of thinking, like, in the prompt chain for code correctness, have you thought about, like, to me that seems kind of close to what like an educational prompt chain would be like too, if users are learning Julius like to learn. Have you explored any like educational use cases also? Be interested to hear what you've looked at.
Yeah, you mean like learning Julius?
No, like using Julius as a tool for learners, like a tutor or a teacher.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. So, Jonah, do you use Notion?
No, sorry.
Okay.
Obsidian.
Obsidian. Okay. Does Obsidian have templates?
I think so.
Okay. Cool. So yeah, and so we're working on this feature. It's still under development, but we call it workflows, and it's sort of like the templates that you would find in Obsidian or Notion, where a user who has no idea about how to use this tool, they can get started with this framework or this like template or like a workflow just to get off the ground. And the power of these workflows is going to be, they're like Lego blocks. You can sort of construct your workflow the way you would want it. and you can make a workflow, for example, for a task that you do over and over again every week or every day, and you can just turn that into a workflow that you can just click a button and run it. All programmed with natural language, by the way. And or you can make a workflow to, for example, teach somebody how to do one particular thing in data science. Like, hey, here's how you use Seaborn, and here's a workflow that teaches you how to do that. And you can sort of watch the model run through these steps. So when we launch workflows, I hope that becomes one of the use cases, as you put it, of teaching people different things about programming or data science.
Very cool. Sounds awesome. Thanks.
Awesome. Okay, so yeah, can you share a bit more about the hardest technical challenges? Is it like routing? Is it evaluation of these systems? Improving the robustness in the sense of models not creating as many errors as you show with code interpreters? Is it just the scaling? You mentioned the VMs and just like making sure that users cannot maliciously mess something up. Yeah, as much as you can share and wherever you want to start.
Totally. So in the beginning, it was getting that infrastructure up and running of these VMs. That was sort of the hardest part, is how do we get that infrastructure up and running where everything is, sandboxed by user. Because the question was, hey, we're letting anyone tell the model what code to run. And what does that mean? Like, can people do something malicious? So building that data security upfront took a lot of effort. And we could have taken the easy route and said, you know what, let's just ship an MVP. But we had at that point enough conviction that people will use this thing that we invested in all of that upfront. But as we scale the infrastructure, as we grew from 0 users to 500,000 users, we started to hit a lot of pains. Our autoscaler broke a bunch of times. I still remember December 13th. It was a pretty dark day because so at that point, all of our paid users, when they subscribed, they would get my phone number and they could text me for questions. And I found that this was a great way to get very candid feedback from users. And then December 13th, we crashed and we were down for about 12 or 13 hours. Like, you could not use Julius. And my phone just kept blowing up all night, all morning, as we were trying to debug this thing and get this thing up and running. And then after that, we only gave my phone number to a very specific one of the very specific plans. So if you pay the $60 plan, you get my phone number. And people still text me questions. And I feel like it's a great way to remove the formality and just talk to users. There was my Facebook password is a little more expensive than that. But the other thing is, I was actually, one time I met a user whose name is actually Julius, and he said, you will not believe this. My name is Julius, and I love using Julius. I'm a data scientist. But the reason we crashed on December 13th was because we got a sudden spike of users. A lot of users came at once because somebody popular found Julius and they said, whoa, this thing is awesome, guys, check it out. And what happened was, since there was a quick spike in users, we ran out of VMs to give to users. It takes about 10 minutes for us to provision these VMs and get them warm. And we have an extra pool of VMs when we get a spike of users. But when that on December 13th, we got so many users in a really short amount of time, we basically ran out of VMs. And then turns out that we hadn't put in timeouts on certain endpoints in our backend. So it took our whole backend down. And it created a whole mess for about 13 hours. But as we scale and reach the scale that we are at today, we were able to build the infrastructure in a more robust way. And now we know a lot more about what it takes to build these VMs and provision them and serve them. So that we can add things like GPUs and add things like different programming languages, etc. So that infrastructure is definitely a hard technical challenge. The other challenge is these models, they're constantly updating. They have a different knowledge cutoff date. For example, Claude in GPT-4 may have different knowledge cutoff dates. How do we make sure that our environments are compatible with the two? And that process is that task is never done. It's sort of like constantly playing with models, understanding where they mess up, etc. An example of this is ChatGPT has code interpreter, and I suspect that OpenAI trains on a lot of code interpreter data. So at some point in time, GPT-4 started hallucinating file paths in a way that code interpreter has file paths. So for any file path, it started to hallucinate /mnt/data in the beginning of the file path. No matter, even if you tell it not to do it, it just thinks that that's the file path because OpenAI probably trains on a lot of code interpreter data. So detecting those things and building guardrails to either regex that out is just maintaining all that. It's really fun, but that's how we deliver the users great experience because the users don't know what's happening under the hood. The complexity is sort of abstracted away from them. And the third thing was playing with code correction. We collect a ton of metrics on what kind of code errors happen, and we really drill down on each of those buckets that happen all the time. For example, like a common one used to be module not found, and the model would try to run code with some module that's not in the environment. And how do we detect that upfront and detect when the AI is trying to use a module that's not in the environment? And when that happens, instead of erroring out, how about we run a code block that installs the module first and then run that code block that the AI generated? That is just like, because we're intensely focused on the use case and like reducing those errors as much as we can. And maintaining all that is important.
Nice. That's actually very the example you gave with the amount data is very, very representative and just like tells us how much of a grind it is to just make sure to always constantly be making sure that these models are not outputting and messing up the experience for your users. Weiler has a question. Maybe before he asks, how big is the team right now? And are you guys hiring?
We're 4 full-time, and we are hiring. We will be soon 5 full-time because we just convinced our intern Veer to drop out of college and join us full-time. And it was fun because I had to talk to his family, and Veer's awesome. He had offers from NVIDIA, Tesla, Autopilot, and Microsoft, and he just convinced his family like, hey guys, we're a startup and it's real. It was really fun, and he's taking the bet on us, so super excited about that. So we'll be 5, and we are hiring engineers. So if you like infrastructure, if you like playing with AI models, if you like front end, all those roles we're hiring for, please reach out to me after on Twitter or on Discord. Anything works. And yeah, we're a small team, which helps give a ton of ownership to everyone. I feel like everyone on the team can touch everything from talking to users to the front end, to the product code, to the infrastructure code, to the models. You get to touch everything and get a lot of ownership. Just last night, we had a user ask for a pin feature. They said, hey, can I pin some of my chats so that I have like hundreds of chats, and I would like to pin some of them at the top I can go look at. And at a normal company, this would be like, hey, we're going to add it to our backlog of tasks. But at Veer at 11 in the night, he just said, okay, I'm going to build this. And he sat down, he built it in 2 hours and pushed it to prod. We push to prod at midnight all the time. So if you like all that, reach out to us.
That's awesome. Same as all Facebook engineers pushing to production after a lunch break. I'm sure you've had similar experience at Facebook. So this is kind of just natural continuation of what you've already done.
Yeah.
Nice. Maybe one question. You don't have to answer if you can share this one. But where do you host your infra? Is it AWS or?
We do GCP right now.
Nice.
Yeah. And primarily because we have a startup credits based. Jonah, do you work at Google or on GCP?
No, just a TPU enjoyer, actually.
Awesome.
Weiler, feel free to ask a question.
Hi, Rahul. Thanks for joining us. Quick question. With your dependence on the proprietary LLM, so OpenAI and whatnot, have you guys invested in solutions for checking drifts in the LLM output? So for example, in your file paths, anomaly there. Since then, have you guys built any solutions to identify such changes in behavior?
Great question. So the workflows feature that I mentioned earlier, we actually build this for ourselves internally first. Is can we actually build workflows for the popular things that our users do, and then run those workflows against like all deployments and periodically, when the models change, etc. So that came along pretty recently, and we realized soon that I think our users might want this, and so we are making that available to our users soon. But right now, that's what we do: is we just build Julius workflows and then just like run those workflows.
Got it. Thank you.
Awesome. Rahul, thanks a lot for joining. I think with this we can wrap it up. It was a pleasure. I'm glad you're probably among the first folks who've heard the backstory behind the Twitter prank and of course the details behind Julius AI and your next steps. So it was really inspiring to listen to you.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it. And it's great to meet everyone. Please feel free to DM me on Twitter afterwards with any questions if you would like to join us. Great to meet.
Awesome.